The sound of gunfire echoed in the distance as Tessa Monroe's bare feet pounded against the hard, packed earth, her breath ragged and desperate. At 19, she had finally found the courage to escape the prison her father's farm had become, but freedom came with a price she wasn't prepared to pay. Blood from her cut feet mingled with the dusty soil of Texas as she ran blindly through the tall grass, the hem of her tattered dress catching on sharp brambles. The year was 1875, and the unforgiving landscape of the Texas frontier offered little mercy to a young woman alone. Tessa's golden hair streamed behind her like a banner as she glanced over her shoulder, seeing the silhouettes of her father and brothers on horseback in the distance. They were gaining on her with every passing second. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed herself harder, knowing what awaited her if they caught her beatings, starvation, and being locked in the root cellar for days on end. "There she is." Her father's voice boomed across the open prairie. "Get her." Tessa choked back a sob as she crested a small hill, her vision blurring from exhaustion and tears. She had been running for nearly an hour, having slipped away during the pre-dawn hours while the household slept. But they had discovered her absence sooner than she'd hoped, and her head start was rapidly diminishing. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, approaching from a different direction than her pursuers. Tessa's panic intensified. Was this another of her father's friends, ready to drag her back to that hellish existence? She changed course, veering toward a stand of cottonwood trees, her only possible shelter. "Miss, this way," a deep voice called out. A tall cowboy on a magnificent chestnut stallion galloped toward her, his face partially obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. He extended his arm as he maneuvered his horse alongside her. "Take my hand," he urged, his blue eyes intense beneath the brim of his hat. Tessa hesitated for only a second before the sound of her father's approaching horses made the decision for her. She reached up and felt the cowboy's strong grip close around her wrist. With a swift, powerful movement, he lifted her off the ground and swung her up onto the saddle in front of him. "Hold tight," he commanded, wrapping one arm around her waist as he turned his horse and spurred it into a gallop. The sensation of flying across the prairie, the powerful animal beneath them, and the stranger's steady arm around her waist overwhelmed Tessa's senses. The wind whipped her hair around her face as they raced away from her pursuers. "They're following," she cried, looking back to see her father and brothers giving chase. "Don't worry, miss. Thunderbolt here is the fastest horse in 3 counties, the cowboy assured her, his breath warm against her ear. He guided the horse into a ravine, following its winding path before emerging in a different direction. The maneuver was calculated to confuse their pursuers, and when Tessa looked back again, she could no longer see the men chasing them. "I'm Beau Winters," the cowboy said as they continued to ride at a breakneck pace. "And who might you be, miss, if you don't mind me asking?" "Tessa," she replied, her voice barely audible over the pounding of hooves. "Tessa Monroe." "Well, Miss Monroe, seems like you're in a heap of trouble," Beau observed, slowing the horse slightly as they approached a dense thicket of trees. "Those men back their family of yours." Tessa nodded, shame washing over her. "My father and brothers, please don't take me back to them. I'd rather die than go back." Something in her voice must have conveyed the depth of her desperation, for Beau's arm tightened protectively around her. "No need to worry about that. I'm not in the habit of returning folks to people they're running from," he assured her. "But we need to keep moving. Your feet are bleeding something fierce, and we need to put more distance between us and them before nightfall." As they rode, Tessa became increasingly aware of the stranger who had come to her rescue. His body was solid and warm against her back, his movements in perfect harmony with his horse. Though she knew nothing about him, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her shoulder blades provided an unexpected comfort. They rode for hours, following game trails and crossing streams to obscure their trail. By midday, they had reached a small cabin nestled in a grove of oak trees. "This is a line shack for the Broken Spur Ranch," Beau explained as he helped her down from the horse. "I work as a ranch hand there. We'll be safe here for the night." Tessa winced as her bare feet touched the ground, the pain she had been ignoring during their escape now impossible to dismiss. "Let me help you," Beau said, noticing her discomfort. Before she could protest, he had scooped her up in his arms and carried her into the cabin. The interior was sparse but clean, with a small wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot against the wall. Beau set Tessa down gently on one of the chairs. "Stay put," he instructed. "I need to take care of Thunderbolt, then I'll tend to those feet of yours." Left alone, Tessa took stock of her situation. She had escaped the cruelty of her father's farm, but what now? She had no money, no possessions beyond the clothes on her back, and nowhere to go. And she had placed her trust in a complete stranger, a handsome stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. When Beau returned, he carried a bucket of water from the nearby stream and set about building a fire in the stove. "Let's get those feet cleaned up," he said, kneeling before her with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. As he carefully washed the dirt and blood from her feet, Tessa studied him. Beau Winters appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His hands were calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was surprisingly tender. "How did you happen to be there just when I needed help?" she asked, wincing as he extracted a small thorn from her heel. Beau's expression grew somber. "I was checking fence lines for the ranch when I heard shouting, thought someone might be in trouble, so I rode toward the commotion." He glanced up at her, his blue eyes searching her face. "Mind telling me why you were running barefoot across open country with those men in pursuit?" Tessa looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. "After my mother died 3 years ago, my father changed. He began drinking heavily and taking his anger out on me. When I refused to marry the man he'd chosen, a friend of his, old enough to be my grandfather, he beat me and locked me in the root cellar." She swallowed hard. "This morning I managed to escape, but I had no time to grab shoes or supplies." Beau's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. "No one deserves to be treated that way, Miss Monroe. You were right to run." After bandaging her feet with strips of clean cloth, Beau prepared a simple meal of beans and biscuits from the supplies kept at the line shack. "Tomorrow I'll take you to the main ranch house," he said as they ate. "Mrs. Kavanaugh, the rancher's wife, is a kind woman. She might be willing to give you work as a housekeeper or cook's helper until you decide what you want to do next." "Why are you helping me?" Tessa asked, the question that had been nagging at her finally finding voice. Beau was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the flickering light of the oil lamp. "My sister ran away from a bad situation once. Someone helped her when she needed it most." He met Tessa's eyes. "I'm just passing on the kindness." That night, Beau insisted Tessa take the cot while he slept on the floor near the door, his rifle within easy reach. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Tessa as she thought about the strange turn her life had taken in a single day. She had gained her freedom, but at what cost? And could she truly trust this cowboy who had appeared like an answer to an unspoken prayer? As dawn broke, Tessa awoke to the smell of coffee. Beau had already been up for some time, tending to his horse and preparing for their departure. "Your father and brothers might still be searching for you," he said as he helped her to her feet. Her wounds had stiffened overnight, making walking painful. "We should get moving as soon as possible." He fashioned makeshift shoes for her from some spare leather and rags he found in the cabin, then lifted her onto Thunderbolt's back once more. The journey to the main ranch house took most of the morning. As they crested a hill, Tessa gasped at the sight below them. The Broken Spur Ranch sprawled across the valley with a large 2-story house, several barns, corrals, and bunkhouses for the ranch hands. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's home," Beau replied with evident pride. "Been working here since I was 16. As they approached the main house, a tall woman with graying hair stepped onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. "Beau Winters, what have you been up to?" she called. "Patrick's been wondering where you disappeared to yesterday." "Got sidetracked, Mrs. Kavanaugh," Beau replied, dismounting and helping Tessa down. "This is Miss Tessa Monroe. She's in a bit of trouble and needs a safe place to stay for a while." Margaret Kavanaugh's sharp eyes took in Tessa's disheveled appearance, the makeshift bandages on her feet, and the fear that still lingered in her eyes. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and took Tessa's hand. "Come inside, child. Let's get you cleaned up and properly fed." Tessa glanced back at Beau, suddenly reluctant to leave the one person who had shown her kindness in recent memory. "Go on," he encouraged with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Kavanaugh will take good care of you. I need to report to the foreman, but I'll check on you later." The next few hours passed in a blur as Margaret Kavanaugh fussed over Tessa, providing her with a hot bath, clean clothes that had belonged to her daughter, now married and living in San Antonio, and a hearty meal that made Tessa realize just how hungry she'd been. After hearing Tessa's story, Margaret's expression hardened. "No father worthy of the name treats his daughter that way," she declared firmly. "You'll stay here as long as you need to, dear. We can always use another pair of hands and you'll be safe at Broken Spur." That evening, as Tessa sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, Beau joined her, having finished his day's work. "Mrs. Kavanaugh says you're staying on," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "I'm glad to hear it." "I can't thank you enough for what you did yesterday," Tessa said, turning to face him. "You saved my life, Beau Winters." He smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Tessa shook her head, "not anyone. Most would have ridden past or worse, taken me back to my father for a reward." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night surrounding them. "Will they come looking for me here?" Tessa finally asked, voicing the fear that had been lurking in her mind. "The Broken Spur is one of the largest ranches in the territory," Beau replied. "Patrick Kavanaugh has influence with the local law and respect from most folks around these parts. Even if your father discovered where you are, he'd think twice before causing trouble here." His words provided some comfort, but Tessa knew her father's temper and stubbornness all too well. If he was determined to find her, he wouldn't give up easily. The next morning, Margaret showed Tessa around the ranch house and outlined her duties as a housekeeper. The work was far less demanding than what she had been accustomed to on her father's farm, and the Kavanaughs treated their workers with respect and fairness. Over the following days, Tessa settled into life at the Broken Spur, gradually relaxing as she realized she was truly safe. The cuts on her feet healed, and with proper food and rest, the haunted look in her eyes began to fade. She saw Beau frequently, as he often had business at the main house, and sometimes joined the family for Sunday dinners at Mrs. Kavanaugh's insistence. Tessa found herself watching for him, her heart beating a little faster whenever he appeared. 2 weeks after her arrival at the ranch, Tessa was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Looking up, she froze in terror as she recognized the 3 riders coming up the long drive to the ranch house her father and brothers. Dropping the wet sheet she had been about to hang, Tessa fled to the house, bursting into the kitchen where Margaret was preparing lunch. "They're here," she gasped, her face pale with fear. "My father and brothers, they've found me." Margaret's expression hardened as she wiped her hands on her apron. "Stay inside, Tessa, I'll handle this." But Tessa couldn't remain hidden, her fear giving way to a newfound determination. She had escaped once, she would not allow herself to be dragged back now. Following Margaret onto the porch, she stood slightly behind the older woman as the riders approached. Hank Monroe dismounted, his weathered face twisted into a scowl as he spotted his daughter. He was a large man with a thick beard and eyes that had grown mean with years of hard living and harder drinking. "There you are, girl," he growled. "You've caused enough trouble. Get your things and come home where you belong." "She's not going anywhere with you, mister." "Monroe," Margaret stated firmly, her stance unyielding. Hank's face darkened with anger. "This is family business, madam. Step aside." "Tessa is under my protection now," Margaret continued, unfazed by his intimidation, "and my husband's. Perhaps you'd like to discuss the matter with him when he returns from town this afternoon." Tessa's brothers, Jacob and Daniel, shifted uncomfortably in their saddles, clearly not having expected resistance. You have no right to keep my daughter, Hank insisted, taking a step forward. She's my property until she's married, and the law's on my side. The law doesn't look kindly on fathers who beat their daughters and lock them in root cellars, came a steady voice from behind the men. Beau approached on foot, having heard the commotion from the nearby corral where he'd been working. Several other ranch hands had also noticed the confrontation and were making their way toward the house, their expressions grim. Hank turned to face Beau, his eyes narrowing in recognition. "You're the one who took her," he accused, "stole her right out from under us." "I helped a young woman who was running for her life," Beau corrected, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. "And I'll do it again if necessary." The tension in the air was palpable as Hank assessed the situation. He was outnumbered, and the determined expressions on the faces of the ranch hands made it clear they wouldn't hesitate to defend Tessa. "This isn't over," Hank spat, turning back to Tessa. "You think you've found yourself a better life here, playing house with these fancy ranchers. You're nothing but a useless burden, girl, always have been." His words were designed to wound, and Tessa felt their sting, but something had changed within her during her time at Broken Spur. She stepped forward, moving out from behind Margaret's protective presence. "I'm not going back with you, father," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Not now, not ever. The life you offered me was no life at all, just endless work and fear. I found something better here, something I never knew existed. Kindness, respect." Hank's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful, I think you've said enough," Beau interrupted, stepping between them. "Miss Monroe has made her choice clear. I suggest you respect it and be on your way." For a moment, it seemed Hank might explode with fury, but a glance at the growing number of ranch hands surrounding them made him reconsider. With a final, venomous look at his daughter, he remounted his horse. "You're dead to me, girl," he declared. "Don't come crawling back when these people tire of you." With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his sons following reluctantly behind. The confrontation left Tessa shaking, but also filled with a strange sense of liberation. She had faced her tormentor and stood her ground. The chains of fear that had bound her to her past were finally breaking. That evening, Beau found Tessa sitting alone by the small pond behind the ranch house, skipping stones across the still water. "You were brave today," he said, settling beside her on the grass. Tessa smiled faintly. "It didn't feel like bravery, more like desperation." "Sometimes they're the same thing," Beau observed, selecting a flat stone and sending it skipping across the water's surface. "Standing up for yourself when everything in you wants to run, that's courage, Tessa." She studied his profile in the fading light, the strong jaw and kind eyes that had begun to feature in her dreams. "Why did you really help me that day, Beau? The truth, please." He was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "I told you about my sister," he finally said. "What I didn't tell you was that no one helped her when she ran. She died out there alone." His voice caught slightly. "When I saw you running across that field, barefoot and desperate, it was like seeing her ghost. I couldn't ride past. I couldn't fail another young woman the way the world failed Anna." Impulsively, Tessa reached out and covered his hand with her own. "I'm sorry about your sister, Beau, and I'm grateful that you were there for me." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition of shared pain, but also of possibility. For the first time since her mother's death, Tessa felt a flutter of hope for her future. As summer progressed, Tessa thrived at Broken Spur. Mrs. Kavanaugh taught her to cook and manage a household, skills her mother had begun to impart before her untimely death, but which had been neglected in the harsh years that followed. She made friends among the other workers and began to feel truly at home. Her friendship with Beau deepened as well. He taught her to ride properly, laughing at her initial trepidation around the gentle mare he selected for her lessons. "She won't bite," he teased as Tessa approached the horse cautiously. "Easy for you to say," Tessa retorted. "You were probably born in the saddle." Despite her fears, she proved to be a natural rider once she overcame her initial nervousness. Soon, they were taking regular rides together during Beau's free time, exploring the vast acreage of the ranch. During one such ride in late August, they stopped to rest by a stream, allowing their horses to drink while they sat in the shade of a large oak tree. "Mrs. Kavanaugh says I've picked up housekeeping faster than any girl she's ever seen," Tessa said proudly. "She's even teaching me to manage the household accounts." Beau smiled, pleased by her enthusiasm. "You've come a long way from that scared girl running across the prairie." "I have you to thank for that," Tessa replied softly, "if you hadn't come along when you did." "But I did," Beau interrupted gently, "and look at you now, strong, independent, beautiful." The last word hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Tessa felt her cheeks grow warm under his gaze. "Beau, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "You've been through so much, and you're just finding your footing. I don't want to rush you or make you feel pressured in any way." Tessa reached out and touched his cheek, the gesture silencing his words. "What if I don't want to wait?" she asked softly. "What if I already know what I feel?" The look in Beau's eyes stole her breath, hope, desire, and something deeper that made her heart race. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss. It was Tessa's first kiss, and it awakened sensations she had never imagined: warmth spreading through her body, a fluttering in her stomach, and a yearning for more. When they finally parted, both were breathing faster. "I've wanted to do that since the day I found you," Beau admitted, his voice husky. Tessa laughed softly. "Even when I was covered in dirt and blood, running for my life, even then," he confirmed, tucking a strand of golden hair behind her ear. "There was something about you, Tessa Monroe. A spirit that couldn't be broken, no matter what life threw at you." Their courtship progressed slowly but steadily after that day. Beau was respectful of Tessa's past traumas, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They found moments to be alone together: walks after dinner, early morning rides before work began, and Sunday afternoons when the ranch operated at a slower pace. Patrick Kavanaugh, the ranch owner, observed their growing attachment with approval. He had come to respect Tessa's work ethic and resilience, and he had always valued Beau as one of his most reliable hands. "That girl's brought a light back to young Winters' eyes," he commented to his wife one evening as they watched the couple walking in the garden. "Haven't seen him smile so much since before his sister died." Margaret nodded in agreement. "They're good for each other. Both had their share of hardship, but together they seemed to find joy." In October, as the leaves began to turn and a crispness settled into the air, Beau approached Patrick Kavanaugh with a proposition. "I'd like to build a house, sir," he stated without preamble. "On that piece of land near the East Creek that you mentioned might be available for senior hands." Patrick studied the young man thoughtfully. "I reckon this has something to do with Miss Monroe." Beau nodded, a hint of color touching his tanned cheeks. "I mean to ask her to marry me, sir, but I want to have something to offer her first, a home of her own." The rancher clapped Beau on the shoulder. "The land is yours, Winters. You've earned it, and for what it's worth, I think Miss Monroe would say yes even if you were proposing a life in a tent." With Patrick's blessing, Beau began working on the small house during his free time, often joined by other ranch hands who volunteered their help. Tessa noticed his frequent absences and the secretive looks exchanged between the men, but whenever she questioned Beau, he would simply smile and change the subject. As Thanksgiving approached, Beau's project was finally complete: a modest but solidly built two-bedroom house with a stone fireplace and a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. The location was perfect, set on a gentle rise overlooking the creek, with cottonwood trees providing shade in summer and shelter from winter winds. On a crisp November afternoon, Beau asked Tessa to accompany him on a ride, claiming he needed to check on some strays reported near the eastern boundary of the ranch. She agreed readily, always happy for a chance to spend time with him away from the busy ranch house. As they rode, Tessa noticed they were heading toward a part of the ranch she hadn't visited before. When they crested a small hill, she gasped at the sight of the neat cabin below, smoke curling from its chimney into the clear blue sky. "Beau, whose place is that?" "I didn't know anyone lived out this way." He reined his horse to a stop, watching her face carefully. "No one does, not yet anyway. Confusion clouded Tessa's features as Beau dismounted and helped her down from her mare. Taking her hand, he led her down the slope toward the cabin. "I don't understand," she said as they approached the house. "Why are we here?" Beau stopped at the gate in the small picket fence that surrounded the yard. "This is what I've been working on these past few months," he explained. "This land is mine, mister. Kavanaugh granted it to me for my years of service, and this house I built it, with some help from the other hands." Tessa's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You built a house, but why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was meant to be a surprise," Beau replied, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "For you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, simple gold band. "Tessa Monroe, when I found you running across that field 6 months ago, I had no idea you would change my life. You've brought light and laughter back into my world, and I can't imagine a future without you in it." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me? Will you make this house a home with me?" Tears filled Tessa's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man holding it, this cowboy who had rescued her in more ways than one. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Beau Winters, I will marry you." His face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and protection. "Come see our home," he said when they finally parted, leading her through the gate and up the path to the front door. The interior was simply furnished with pieces Beau had either made himself or purchased from craftsmen in the nearby town. A quilt that Margaret Kavanaugh had contributed brightened the bedroom, and the kitchen was equipped with basic necessities. "It's not much," Beau said, suddenly uncertain as he watched Tessa explore the rooms. "Not compared to the main house at Broken Spur, but it's perfect," Tessa interrupted, turning to him with shining eyes. "It's the most beautiful home I've ever seen because it was built with love." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with the Kavanaughs standing as witnesses and the ranch hands and their families in attendance. Margaret had helped Tessa sew a wedding dress of ivory muslin, elegant in its simplicity, and had loaned her a lace veil that her own daughter had worn. Beau, dressed in his best clothes with his boots polished to a high shine, watched in awe as his bride walked toward him, her face glowing with happiness. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared after they had exchanged their vows. "You may kiss your bride." Their kiss was a promise of protection, of partnership, of a love that had grown from the most unexpected of beginnings. The celebration that followed was joyous, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire county. As evening fell, Beau and Tessa slipped away from the festivities, riding to their new home in the gathering dusk. Standing on the porch of their cabin, Beau swept Tessa into his arms. "Welcome home, Mrs. Winters," he said softly, carrying her across the threshold. That night, as they lay together in the quiet intimacy of their new marriage, Tessa marveled at how far she had come from the desperate girl running barefoot across the prairie. "What are you thinking about?" Beau asked, tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "How strange life is," she replied, nestling closer to him. 6 months ago, I was trapped in a nightmare with no way out, and now here I am, happier than I ever dreamed possible." "You saved yourself, Tessa," Beau reminded her. "You had the courage to run." "And you had the courage to help me," she countered, raising herself on one elbow to look into his eyes. "We saved each other, I think." He smiled, pulling her down for a kiss that deepened with passion and promise. In each other's arms, they had found not just safety, but a love that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The winter of 1875-1876 was harsh, with frequent snowstorms and temperatures that dropped well below freezing. But inside their snug cabin, Beau and Tessa created a warm haven, their love for each other growing stronger with each passing day. Beau continued his work at the Broken Spur, rising before dawn to ride to the main ranch and often returning after dark. Tessa kept busy maintaining their home and helping Margaret with special projects at the main house, her skills as a cook and housekeeper improving under the older woman's tutelage. In February, during a rare mild spell, they received unexpected visitors. Two riders approached their cabin late one afternoon as Tessa was preparing dinner. Beau, who had returned early from his duties, stepped onto the porch, his hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his hip. As the riders drew closer, Tessa joined her husband on the porch and gasped in recognition. "It's my brothers," she said, her voice tight with apprehension. Jacob and Daniel Monroe dismounted at a respectful distance, their expressions uncertain. They were younger than Beau had remembered, Jacob barely 20, Daniel perhaps 18. "What do you want?" Beau called, keeping Tessa slightly behind him. Jacob removed his hat, twisting it nervously in his hands. "We came to see Tessa," he replied, "to make sure she's all right." Tessa stepped forward, her initial fear giving way to curiosity. Her brothers had never been cruel to her the way their father had been, but they had never protected her either, following Hank's lead out of fear or indifference. "I'm fine," she said coolly. "Better than fine, actually." "Why are you really here?" The brothers exchanged glances before Daniel spoke. "Pa died last month. Pneumonia took him quick." The news hit Tessa with unexpected force. Despite everything he had done, Hank Monroe was still her father, and his death marked the end of a chapter in her life. She felt Beau's hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said finally, uncertain what else to say. "There's more," Jacob continued. "The farm is ours now. We've been trying to make a go of it," but he trailed off, looking embarrassed. "What your brother is trying to say," Daniel picked up, "is that we're making a mess of things. Neither of us knows the first thing about running a household. The place is falling apart without you, Tessa." Tessa felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication that her contributions had been more valuable than her father had ever acknowledged, sorrow for the brothers who were clearly struggling, and a fierce gratitude for the new life she had built with Beau. "I can't come back," she said firmly. "This is my home now with my husband." "We're not asking you to come back for good," Jacob clarified hastily. "Just, maybe you could visit. Help us get things organized, show us what to do." Beau and Tessa exchanged a look, an entire conversation passing between them without words. "You boys look like you could use a hot meal," Beau finally said, his posture relaxing slightly. "Come inside and we can talk." Over dinner, the brothers shared news of the neighboring farms and the changes in the community since Tessa's departure. They were awkward but sincere in their attempts to reconnect with their sister, and by the time the meal was finished, the tension had eased considerably. "We thought Pa was right about everything," Daniel admitted as they sat around the fire after dinner. "But seeing you now, Tessa, you're happy." "Really happy. It makes us wonder what else he was wrong about." "People can change," Tessa said softly. "Even after they're set in their ways, it's never too late to choose a different path." The brothers stayed the night, sleeping on pallets by the fire, and in the morning, a plan had been formed. Tessa would ride with Beau to the Monroe farm the following week to help her brothers organize the household and teach them basic skills they would need to maintain the place. It would be a brief visit, with Beau remaining at her side throughout. As they waved goodbye to the brothers, Tessa felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, not forgiveness exactly, but a beginning of reconciliation with the parts of her past that could be salvaged. "Are you sure about this?" Beau asked as they watched the riders disappear into the distance. Tessa nodded, leaning against his solid strength. "They're young. They were as much under his thumb as I was in their way. They deserve a chance to find their own path now that he's gone." The visit to the Monroe farm the following week was strange but ultimately healing for Tessa. The place that had been a prison now seemed smaller, less threatening. With Beau's protective presence and her own newfound confidence, she was able to face the ghosts of her past and begin to lay them to rest. She showed her brothers how to organize the household, shared recipes their mother had taught her, and helped them develop a plan for managing the farm more efficiently. When they departed after 3 days, the relationship between Tessa and her brothers had taken its first tentative steps toward repair. "Thank you," she said to Beau as they rode home, the Monroe farm receding behind them, "for understanding why I needed to do that." He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "You're the strongest person I know, Tessa Winters, and the most forgiving." Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new beginnings. As the land awakened from winter's sleep, Tessa discovered that new life was stirring within her as well. When the doctor confirmed her suspicions, she could barely contain her joy as she waited for Beau to return from work. She prepared his favorite meal and set the table with special care, placing a small pair of knitted booties beside his plate, a gift Margaret had helped her make in secret. When Beau arrived home, tired from a long day of branding calves, he noticed the special preparations with curiosity. "What's the occasion?" he asked, washing up for dinner. "Sit down," Tessa urged, her eyes sparkling with barely contained excitement. "I have something to tell you." As Beau took his seat, his gaze fell on the tiny booties. For a moment he stared at them uncomprehendingly, then his eyes widened with realization. "Tessa, are you?" She nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "We're going to have a baby, Beau, in the fall." The look of pure joy that transformed his face was something Tessa knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He rose from his chair and swept her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Beau's hand rested protectively over Tessa's still, flat stomach, his touch gentle and reverent. "I promise you both," he said softly, "I will always keep you safe. You will never know the kind of fear or pain that marked our childhoods. Our baby will grow up surrounded by love and kindness." Tessa covered his hand with her own, believing with all her heart in the future they were creating together. "I know," she replied simply. "That's why I fell in love with you." The months that followed were filled with preparations for the baby's arrival. Beau added a nursery to their home, working evenings and weekends to complete it before winter set in. The ranch hands' wives organized a gathering to present Tessa with handmade baby clothes and blankets, while Margaret Kavanaugh gifted them a beautiful wooden cradle that had been used for her own children. Tessa's brothers visited twice during her pregnancy, their relationship continuing to heal with each encounter. They brought furniture from their mother's hope chest, items Tessa had thought lost forever, and shared stories of their childhood before their mother's death and their father's descent into bitterness. As Tessa's time drew near, Beau became increasingly protective, arranging for a young ranch hand's wife to stay with Tessa when he couldn't be home, ensuring she was never alone. "You're fussing too much," Tessa chided gently one evening as he insisted on doing the dishes while she rested. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my baby," Beau replied stubbornly, "and not my wife." His concern proved warranted when Tessa went into labor during a fierce November storm. The planned midwife was unable to reach them due to flooded creek crossings, leaving Beau to ride desperately to the main ranch for help. He returned with Margaret Kavanaugh, who had assisted at numerous births over the years, and one of the ranch hands' wives who had experience as a midwife's assistant. The labor was long and difficult, testing Tessa's strength and Beau's nerves as he paced outside the bedroom door, barred from entry by Margaret's firm instructions. "Men are no use at times like these," she had declared. "Go boil water and stay out of the way." After 16 hours, as dawn broke on a clear November morning, the cry of a newborn filled the small cabin. Margaret emerged from the bedroom, her face tired but triumphant. "You have a daughter, Beau," she announced. "A beautiful, healthy little girl." When he entered the bedroom, the sight that greeted him stole his breath away. Tessa, exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up as he approached, her smile so full of love it made his heart ache. "Meet your daughter," she said softly, tilting the bundle so he could see the perfect little face, eyes squeezed shut, a dusting of dark hair covering the tiny head. With trembling hands, Beau accepted his daughter, marveling at how something so small could instantly claim such a large portion of his heart. "She's perfect," he whispered, overcome with emotion, "just like her mother." They named her Anna Margaret Winters, honoring both Beau's lost sister and the woman who had become like a mother to Tessa. As they presented their daughter to the world, the story of how they met became a favorite among the ranch community, the barefoot girl running for her life, and the cowboy who lifted her to safety. "It's like something from a dime novel," one of the younger ranch hands commented during the baby's christening celebration. Beau laughed, his arm around Tessa's waist as she held their daughter. "Better than any story I ever read," he replied, "because it's real." As their daughter grew, so did their love for each other. The small cabin expanded along with their family. A second child, a son named Patrick Henry, joined them 2 years later, followed by twin girls, Sarah and Elizabeth, the year after that. Beau's position at the ranch advanced until he became foreman, respected by the hands and trusted implicitly by Patrick Cavanaugh. Tessa developed a reputation throughout the county for her excellent cooking and household management, often consulted by new brides seeking advice. The Monroe brothers became frequent visitors, doting uncles to their nieces and nephew. With Tessa's guidance, they transformed their father's farm into a successful operation, gradually healing the wounds of their difficult childhood. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Beau surprised Tessa with a special gift: the deed to a larger parcel of land adjacent to their property, purchased with savings he had accumulated over the years. "For the future," he explained as they stood on a hill overlooking their expanded homestead. "For our children and maybe someday their children." Tessa leaned against him, watching their little ones playing in the yard below, their laughter carrying on the warm autumn breeze. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing to the life they had built together. "That day when you found me running across the prairie," Beau smiled, turning her to face him. "I knew I wanted to keep you safe," he admitted, "but I had no idea how completely you would change my life, how empty it was before you filled it with your courage and your love." "And to think," Tessa mused, her eyes twinkling, "it all started because I was running barefoot from my father's farm." "Until a cowboy caught up and lifted you to safety," Beau finished, drawing her into his arms for a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness of their first, yet was deepened by the years they had shared and the family they had created. As the sun began to set, painting the Texas sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, they walked hand in hand back to their home, where their children waited and the future stretched before them, a future built on a foundation of love that had begun in a moment of desperate courage and unexpected rescue. In the years that followed, the Winters family became a cornerstone of the community. Beau's reputation as a fair and skilled ranch manager spread throughout the territory, bringing offers from larger operations. But he remained loyal to the Broken Spur, eventually becoming a partner in the ranch when Patrick Cavanaugh decided to semi-retire. Tessa flourished as well, opening a small bakery in the growing town nearby, where her pies and cakes became legendary. Between managing their growing homestead and her business, she still found time to mentor young women in the community, particularly those who had experienced difficult circumstances similar to her own. Their children grew strong and confident, raised with the love and security that both Beau and Tessa had lacked in their own childhoods. Anna Margaret, their firstborn, inherited her mother's golden hair and her father's steady determination. By the time she was 16, she was already showing a talent for horsemanship that rivaled Beau's. Patrick Henry, their son, was quieter and more thoughtful, with a gift for working with animals that made him invaluable during calving season. The twins, Sarah and Elizabeth, were a study in contrasts. Sarah serious and studious, Elizabeth adventurous and outgoing, but they shared an unbreakable bond and fierce loyalty to their family. When Anna turned 18, the family celebrated with a grand party at the ranch. As Tessa watched her daughter dancing with the son of a neighboring rancher, she was struck by how fortunate they had all been. "What are you thinking about?" Beau asked, coming to stand beside her. Though his dark hair was now touched with silver at the temples, he was still as handsome as the day he had rescued her, the years having added character rather than diminished his appeal. "How different her life is from what mine was at her age," Tessa replied, leaning into his embrace. "She's never known fear or deprivation. She's free to choose her own path, her own love. Beau nodded, his eyes following their daughter as she laughed at something her dance partner said. That's what we wanted for all of them, the freedom we had to fight for. Later that night, as they sat on the porch of their home, now a substantial two-story house that had grown along with their family, Beau took Tessa's hand in his. I have something to show you, he said, leading her to the small barn behind the house. Inside, he lit a lantern and guided her to a workbench in the corner. There, carefully preserved in a glass-fronted shadow box, were the makeshift shoes he had fashioned for her during their first days together, the leather and rags that had protected her injured feet during their journey to the broken spur. You kept them all these years? Tessa asked, touched by the sentiment. Beau nodded, his expression serious. To remind me of how precious what we have is. How easily it might never have happened at all if you hadn't had the courage to run, or if I hadn't ridden that particular fence line that morning. Tessa turned to him, her eyes shining with tears and love. I used to think it was chance, a lucky accident that you found me, but now I believe it was something more. Call it fate or divine intervention or simply the way love finds a way, but I think we were meant to find each other. Beau Winters. He gathered her in his arms, his touch as tender now as it had been when they were young. I think you're right, Mrs. Winters, and I thank God every day for bringing you running barefoot into my life. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, the Texas night spread vast and star-studded above them. Tessa reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from terror to triumph, from isolation to belonging, from desperate flight to the steadfast love that had transformed both their lives. The young woman who had fled her father's farm with nothing but the clothes on her back and the desperate hope for something better had found not just safety, but a love that had withstood every challenge, growing stronger with each passing year. And the cowboy who had lifted her to safety had found in her the heart and home he had been searching for all his life. Together, they had built something beautiful from the most unlikely of beginnings, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the enduring strength of love that blooms even in the harshest of circumstances. As they reached their porch, Beau paused, drawing Tessa into one more embrace beneath the Texas moon. I love you, Tessa Winters, he whispered against her hair, more today than yesterday and not as much as tomorrow. And I love you, she replied, her voice steady with the certainty that had carried them through 20 years of marriage. My cowboy, my rescuer, my heart. In that moment, with the home they had built together surrounding them and the family they had created sleeping safely inside, they were as they had always been and would always be, two souls who had found in each other the perfect complement. The missing piece, the answer to a prayer neither had dared to voice until fate brought them together on a desperate morning long ago, when she was running barefoot from her father's farm, until a cowboy caught up and lifted her to safety.